Andreas Rentschler, who is CEO of Daimler Trucks, Georg Pachter, CEO of MAN Truck and Bus, and also here today we have Ivan Hodjak, who is Secretary General of ACEA. We're going to start, Mr. Skippers is going to start the press conference with a speech on the topics of emissions and fuel efficiency. And after that, we'll open up the floor for your questions, which you can make to any of the CEOs present or Mr. Hodjak. So without any further ado, I shall hand the floor over to Mr. Skippers.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, the increasing demand for freight transport and the continual push to protect the environment pose a challenge to the transport sector, our government and the energy sector. This challenge impacts the entire European economy. On behalf of the commercial vehicle industry of Europe, I would like to talk to you today about how we can rise to this challenge by building on the strengths of our industry. Already, commercial vehicle manufacturers have successfully implemented Euro 5, bringing down regulated emissions by over 95% compared to the 1970s. Now, in responding to Euro 6, manufacturers have moved up yet another gear. Thanks to our leadership and investments in technology, pollutant emissions have been slashed to near zero levels. Compared to Euro 5, which itself achieved a major reduction in emissions compared to Euro 3 and 4, NOx emissions have been reduced by a further 80%, and particulate mass emissions, including ultra-fine particles, have fallen by a further 67%. This is in addition to the introduction of a massively more complex suite of new tests. The achievement of Euro 6 is even greater when we consider that compliance is required across the entire range of vehicle families. This means that some tens of thousands of vehicle types have to comply, not just one model. But the benefits of the new technologies being showcased here in Hanover will not be felt unless these new vehicles are actually put on the road. This is certainly challenging in the context of the current market, with people holding on to their trucks for much longer than before, and the market 20% below the replacement rate. The average age of trucks is rising. The significant proportion of older, more polluting Euro 0, 1, 2 and 3 trucks on the roads is obviously having a negative impact on the environment. Europe must make the most of the solutions brought to the market by Euro 5 and Euro 6 by helping to encourage fleet renewal. This would not only greatly and more quickly improve air quality, but would also stimulate the economy. There is a huge potential to make a real difference. After Euro 6, the next step is to go on reducing CO2 emissions. European manufacturers are already world leaders in fuel efficiency. Indeed, modern European commercial vehicles are a third more fuel efficient than 30 years ago, producing less CO2 per ton than most passenger cars. These CO2 savings have been achieved at the same time as the dramatic decreases in NOx and particulate matter from the Euro standards, despite both initiatives requiring sometimes conflicting measures. The industry did not need incentives or legislation to achieve this, as fuel efficiency is simply the backbone of our business model, as I will explain in a moment. Through its own Vision 2020 strategy, the industry has already shown its commitment towards ever more sustainable transport. Announced in Hanover in 2008, this strategy aims to decrease fuel consumption by 20% by 2020, compared to the 2005 levels. This is an equivalent to an improvement of over 1.3% per year. We are already well on track with this objective and continue to seek new pathways to go beyond it. The Commission is preparing a strategy on CO2 emissions for heavy-duty vehicles. Our industry awaits with great expectation this strategy to be announced by Climate Commissioner Hedegaard next year, and we have taken the opportunity to formulate some recommendations. First, CO2 emissions from trucks cannot be addressed via a one-size-fits-all policy. Any strategy to reduce CO2 emissions from heavy-duty vehicles has to take account of the key features of trucks. The shape of vehicles, which depends on their daily mission. No one truck is alike. The same tractor or engine may end up pulling very different trailers and combinations, affecting the CO2 emission of the complete vehicle. The usage pattern of the vehicles and their cargo, in other words, the work they do. Is the payload heavy or large? Is the road flat or hilly? Will the vehicle travel over a long distance in one go, or is the journey short with many starts and stops? All these usage patterns result in different CO2 emissions. A CO2 reduction policy for commercial vehicles should therefore not follow the same approach as that for passenger cars. It should use the appropriate measurement metric, that is to say, work done, or according to what the vehicle carry, fuel consumption per ton kilometer, cubic kilometer, or passenger kilometer. The policy should aim to develop methods that cover the wide variations in vehicles' emissions. To this end, ACEA encourages the use of a computer simulation tool based on real-world data that reflects the emissions produced under real driving circumstances. This would allow for a transparent comparison of vehicle performance and would be welcomed by customers as a guidance tool to help them purchase the best vehicle for the job. Policy measures should propel the natural force of customer demand. Trucks and buses are economic goods. Fuel efficiency is a key element in the purchasing decision, as fuel represents 30% of the running cost, almost as much as the cost of employing drivers. There has therefore been a clear business case to minimize fuel consumption for decades, and the sector has been self-regulating with regards to CO2 emissions, as these are directly linked to fuel consumption. Progress must be embedded in a wider effort, involving all players. CO2 emissions can only come down effectively with efforts from not only manufacturers, but also operators, drivers, governments, infrastructure and urban planners, and the fuel and energy industry. That is what we call the integrated approach. Vehicle technology is important, but there is low-hanging fruit that also needs picking. An improved traffic flow, intelligent infrastructure, logistics, driver training, adjustments in vehicle size and dimensions, availability of alternative fuels, and better cooperation between transport modes. The full impact of new vehicle technologies will only be felt when the existing fleet has been replaced. But these other measures will have an immediate impact on the entire existing fleet. And now I would like to say a few words specifically on the issues of vehicle size and dimensions. A large truck has a significantly smaller carbon footprint than a smaller commercial vehicle. Put simply, it uses less fuel to move more goods. It is therefore illogical to stand in the way of cross-border use of European Modular System trucks, EMS, which are longer combinations of trucks and trailers. Enabling 3 trucks to be replaced by 2 and thereby bringing fuel consumption down by about 17%, EMS represents the most cost-efficient and immediate way of reducing CO2 emissions. We must have a consistent, harmonized and reliable regulatory system. as we have seen, different policy goals in areas like emissions, fuel consumption, and size and dimension, but also safety and noise, have created rules that are sometimes inconsistent. Therefore, in line with the main outcomes of CARS 21, smarter, more coordinated regulation is needed for the automotive industry. European regulation has harmonized requirements for emissions from vehicles. However, infrastructure policy, driver training, and even vehicle maintenance requirements are still inconsistent between member states. This creates confusion and makes it difficult to invest in better harmonized solutions. Ladies and gentlemen, the European commercial vehicle sector is a global trendsetter, producing vehicles which are safer, cleaner and more effective than ever before. This lead has not been achieved through applying regulations. Innovations have always been a consequence of customer demand. We're all deeply committed to progress and are confident that our industry will remain a strong leader. However, the reality is that demand for commercial vehicles is strongly proportional to the strength of the economy, which is fragile in Europe. Truck makers have suffered accordingly, with heavy sales down over 30% since the 2007 and 2008 levels. European policymakers need to find solutions to strengthen the economy. They need to apply more harmonized and smarter regulation principles. Finally, they must build on what Europe already has: a robust and highly competitive freight transport market. With such a framework, we can continue to work together to drive the economy and care for the environment. That concludes my prepared comments. I don't know if any of my colleagues has anything to add before we open up for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Supers. As Mr. Super said, we're now opening up for your questions. But before we do so, I would just like to remind you that this is an ACEA press conference, so as such we are taking questions about the industry as a whole and not questions on individual companies. So with that in mind, who would like to take the first question? Gentleman down the back. Sorry, could you say who you are and what media you represent, and also who you would like to take your question?
My name is Claude Evans for Truck and Business magazine in Belgium, and the question applies to the whole ACEA board. You've mentioned weights and dimensions. We might expect a proposal from the Commission on the new weights and dimensions directive somewhere in 2013. Could you give us an update on progress that might have been made towards longer trucks with more aerodynamic caps, for example? What are your hopes at that time?
Mr. Skippers, would you like to?
Sure. The EMS trucks are already driving successfully in several of the European countries. So I think there's not a pilot anymore in the Netherlands. It's standard practice now in the Netherlands, but also other markets, parts of Germany, Scandinavia. Those trucks have operated very successfully, and we're looking for European legislation that allows those trucks to be used over bigger distances across Europe.
I would like to add, one thing is that we are talking about this specific truck, and there is also a test ongoing in Germany at the moment. It seemed to be very openly from the public very critical because of a lot of different things. I'm not for it, or I cannot understand this argument. So in the meantime, we have to look also to go further with CO2 reduction with aerodynamic trailers and trucks. I think all of us are working with the body manufacturers on that one. I think this is also one thing, besides every potential of bigger trucks. I think the aerodynamic, we can look into that really without this length discussion. And if there are later on moderate growth in length potentially doable. This will help, of course, when you look to a lot of aerodynamic potentials that we see with CO2 reduction. This one is longer truck, the longest what we can see, are used in a lot of countries around the world. It's not only Scandinavia, it's the US, it's Australia with the big road trains. This is also one of the solutions, but again, aerodynamics, we can do it also without increasing the length too much and have maybe society acceptance then also in this field. So we have to be also flexible on that time.
Okay. There's a question here at the back of the floor, down the back.
Thank you. Given the cost pressures that
Sorry,
are...
would you mind saying your name and what media are you from?
My name is Oliver Dixon and I'm omnipresent.
Okay.
Given the cost pressures evident across the industry, how long will Western Europe remain a sustainable and viable production base for the truck industry?
For a long, long time.
Does anyone else want to add anything?
I'm deeply convinced, you know, we can make a big answer now out of it.
What is the question?
Because if you think we have to move production outside of Europe only of cost pressure, I would say this is the wrong approach to talk it only from this angle. You have to look to productivity. You have to understand that trucks are not trucks because you know, every truck is different that we produce. So we have to have a high flexibility, and so far Europe is really qualification-wise with a lot of flexibility the right approach to produce trucks here. So I don't see that we are moving out. So that was in short my answer for a long, long time. Sorry.
If I just may add one thing, I think also that the reason for why European truck industry is setting the standard for worldwide logistic solutions is that we have a very integrated system when it comes to production together with R&D and our supplier base. And if you look to the total cost structure for drivers today, the actual part of the capital cost in relation to what we can achieve, as shown here during the presentation, is quite small, and that means that you have an integrated structure will mean a lot to us going forward.
So I think I would emphasize that within Europe, we are the world technology leaders if it comes to commercial vehicle technology. So I also see that Europe would be a manufacturing base for a long, long time.
Okay. Virginie at the front. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Sheita from Auto Arabia Media Group. I have a question regarding the Middle East and North Africa region. We noticed that a lot of the commercial cars, they are very old, like 10, 20 years old. Is the ACEA planning to set up or work together with the governments in the near future regarding establishing a new benchmark regarding the active and passive safety features as well as the emissions? And if yes, how are the plans for the rebuilding phase for some of the countries regarding the Arab Spring? Thank you.
Well, you are talking to the European industry. For the North African regions, yes, we are talking to them. We are talking to them at the level of the EU. They are not necessarily plans laying on the table. I think it goes company by company at this very moment. But when you are talking about replacement of old trucks, I think that the North African region is not the only region that has this problem. The problem exists also in Europe. And I think it's absolutely essential that we find a way in Europe, and especially in some parts of Europe, how to replace the old trucks, how to renew the fleet. And that's something that we have been discussing with the governments, that we have been discussing with the Commission, that we are discussing with the Commission, and something on which we are going to insist. It's not only the North African, Asian, other regions. Europe has similar problem, and we do have to replace or renew the fleet also in the European Union and the European countries as such. So So it is not an issue that is specific to one region. It's an issue that is specific, it's almost global issue.
Okay. Yes, Virginie. Thank you.
Philip van Doorn, Deloitte in Antwerp. I would like to come back to the question of my colleague. Regarding aerodynamics, are there any signs that the European Commission could be open to take aerodynamical progress into the new directive on weight and dimensions? Does ACEA have contacts with them, and to what extent is the European Commission open to that proposal?
Yes, we are discussing it with the Commission. Yes, we believe that they are open to it, but I cannot tell you exactly what is the progress at this moment. But we have contacts with the European Commission, with the DG Move, with the key executives in the DG Move, and there seems to be progress. I cannot tell you at this stage anything more. Thank you.
Okay. The question here.
Hi, my name is Sridhar. I work with Commercial Vehicle Magazine India. In Europe, we have seen consolidation happening. A couple of big manufacturers have come under the wing of a large group. Globally and in Europe, do we see consolidation increasing, or do we still see a dispersed market?
Well, I think you're right. We have seen consolidation increasing in Europe and worldwide, and I'm not so sure what the issue with that is. But it is a trend that we've seen over the past years. That's a correct observation.
I was asking, would you see this going forward? Would you see it increasing and happening more and more, considering the difficult times that we are in?
So let me give you my ideas about it. You know, in Europe we have a very limited number of independent manufacturing. In North America we have only 4 as well. So the real consolidation is not happening in the triad. There happened a lot of consolidation in the recent years, but from my point of view there is not a lot of potential any longer. When it comes to consolidation, from my perspective, it's more in the emerging markets, like in India, like in China, where we have a lot of small manufacturers as well, and maybe in Russia. There we could see some movement. But basically in the triad, I would limit a lot of trend more, because, you know, otherwise we will end up with one manufacturer per country. I don't think it's in the interest of our customers. So it's more issue that we will see in the emerging markets.
I just want to support that. I mean, if you look to the real growing markets, especially in this industry, it is of course it will not happen in Europe, that is clear. So every European traditional company is going outside, is trying to achieve market share in Brazil, in Russia, in India, and China. And therefore there will be a lot of cooperations in future, can be any form of cooperation, including joint ventures, including total takeover. In some countries it's possible, in some not. So you will see, especially in these countries, then consolidations, because there are a lot of traditional, from the history coming small entities, sometimes state-owned entities, which then privatized but are not strong enough to survive. So you will see a lot of consolidations, but I wouldn't see them in Europe.
Okay. Do we have any further questions from the floor? Okay, one more here. Yeah.
I want to ask a non-technology question. I'm from ChinaITA.com, and we focus on China road transport industry. I know the presidents almost have been to visit China. I want to know, how do you compare the China transport company, and what's the difference with the European transport company? Thank you.
You know, it's always a combination of a lot of different kind of things. If you look to transportation efficiency, it's the overall logistic system that comes to my mind. It's a question of infrastructure. It's a combination between the different kind of transportation methods, if it's ships, if it's airplanes, if it's trucks, if it's trains. And when you look to the most efficient transportation infrastructure that we see so far, it's indeed Europe, because it's a very competitive business in the meantime. And also the United States, where the combination between the different areas is really organized to an optimum. There, China is behind. Now, the toughest part of the question is how far are they behind? To judge this, if it's 10 years, if it's 15 years, I'm not the expert of the logistic system. I'm only a truck manufacturer who is delivering to such customers' trucks. But from a broader perspective, the transportation efficiency China has achieved so far is not on the level of Europe and the United States.
Just to give a short figure on that, I can say that if you look into the GDP, or the logistical share of the GDP in Europe is approximately 7 to 8%, a little bit depending on how you calculate, and in China it's 18 to 19%. It has different explanations, of course, but the main explanation is actually the logistical inefficiency. And when you see the average annual mileage in China, it is a huge potential. And what I think personally is pointed out, it's interesting in the new 5-year plan, is that this is a key area of improvement also with the inland relocalization. And just what Mr. Rentschler said also, I think is interesting. In Europe we have 7%, but still so much to do when you look to the entire logistical chain actually. Because the thing with logistic systems is that they tend to be sub-optimized. And I think going forward in the logistical system is how do you find means of actually looking through the whole flow. And that will be the key factor also for the CO2 challenge. But that we can come back to another day.
Okay.
I think one side are the logistic companies. I think that was absolutely answered now. The other question may direct into the question, what about the manufacturers? And if you look to the manufacturers, you can see one of the biggest differences are they are very much focused on production today, and of course sales as well, but not after sales and this whole logistic, let's say, support. And that is, I think, one of the biggest differences. We are very much focused on after sales organization, service organization, that the whole supply chain is covered by a company to make it happen that these logistic companies just focusing on their transport and not taking care of service, of maintenance, of all these issues. This is more done by the producing companies, and this is one of the biggest differences.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, it's just 4:30 now, so I'd like to take this opportunity once again to thank Mr. Schippers and the other CEOs and Mr. Hajek for being present, and also to all of you for coming to this ACEA press conference. And don't hesitate if you need any more information to come to me. Thank you.